What's up, everybody? It's Spencer Alessi, and this is the Esports Narrative. What is up, podcast listeners? Thank you for joining this episode and listening to this episode of the Startup Esports Narrative. This is an episode with my newest friend, Mo Hallaba. He is the final boss at Rekt GG. We go into a lot of different things in this episode related to business and startups. We talk about some news stories from the Esports Observer and Crunchbase. We talk about some esports specific things. And then we get into more startup related things, such as Mo's background and his skill set for his company, what lessons he's learned along the way, the vision that he has for his company, what's standing between him and his biggest goals, and tons of other great stuff. I know you guys are going to really love this episode. It's a little different look than what you would normally get from the esports narrative. I hope you really enjoy it. Please listen to the whole thing to the very end, and then subscribe, leave me a rating, give me a review. Super appreciate you all listening and taking time out of your day to consume this content. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoy it. Here's the show. Hello. Good morning, good evening, good night. Welcome to episode 2 of Startup Esports Narrative. I am your host, Spencer Alessi, and this is a new series I am doing called Startup Esports Narrative. It's a show where I talk specifically with esports startup founders, CEOs, venture capitalists, owners, and final bosses like this guy right here, and more. And we talk about the business and startup grind of esports. And joining me this time is Mo Hallaba. He's the final boss of Rekt.gg. And for those who are aware or not aware, Rekt is a place for all of gamers and esports fans alike to kind of share their highlights, their crazy flick shots, epic fails, their streaming moments, all their epic gaming moments. And they have a video editor built right in their browser. They have weekly prizes, and they even have the ability to kind of remix your friends or other highlight players' videos in an effort to kind of troll them or poke fun at them as well. So Mo, thank you for joining me tonight. I hope I did the intro justice on what you guys are up to. We'll talk about that in a minute, but thank you for joining us tonight. It's really cool to have you.
Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
So first, I'd like to get a sense of your origin story as far as video games go. I always like to get a sense of my guests of like where they came from as far as video games. What's your earliest memories playing video games?
So actually, the earliest thing that I can remember is probably when I was living in France. That was eons ago. But I was a kid, and my dentist's office had an NES, an original NES. And I used to play the Tiny Toons game for NES at the dentist. It's either that or I think my cousin, who was only a couple of years older than me, but he lived in Egypt, and so they were decades behind. So they actually had an Atari, but we were still playing it. I'm not that old, but and there was this cops and robbers game where it was split screen, and one guy was the cop and the other was the robber. But basically, like the cop, it was unwinnable because if you screen hopped as the robber, like you could always just get away. So those are probably the first two things that I.
That's probably some of the more obscure, I would say, experiences or memories of my guests coming on. So most of my guests have experience with FPS or MOBAs and kind of like that, which kind of illustrates their age a little bit. So that's kind of.
I'm an old guy. I don't know how old the rest of your guys have on, but
how old are you?
I'm 31, and I've been playing video games for as long as I could actually hold the controller. So
I hear you. I'm the same way. I'm 30. I'll be 31 in September. So I kind of along the same line. So what you're saying is reminiscent of my childhood as well. Now fast forwarding a little bit, when you were getting older, maybe teenage years, when would you say you were first noticing uh, esports or competitive video gaming, because they didn't call it that back in the day. But when did you start noticing this being more of a competitive thing, or were you aware of it kind of growing up or going into your 20s?
Yeah, definitely. So when I was in high school, I lived in Poland. This is a story I love telling. Um, and we used to play a lot of Counter Strike. And this is still before broadband internet was widespread. So we had LAN parties, and so we'd all get together and um, put all our giant computers in the same room together, and we'd have to carry our like 40-pound monitors, and they were only like 15-inch, but they were 40 pounds. Um, and so we used to split up our group into teams and compete against each other. But then um, I found out that some of my friends were actually gonna compete for the Counter Strike World Cup, or there was some kind of tournament. This was like all the way at the beginning of esports, and one of my friends was actually on a clan with Taz and Neo from Virtus Pro, like way before they
Wow,
got famous.
that's awesome.
Yeah, so it was like one of my best friends, and I remember like his mom wouldn't let him play because he had to study, but like those guys were obviously beginning to compete and getting good. So that's probably like my first memory of esports actually becoming a thing. And of course now if they had that discussion,
Yeah.
he could be up on the stage playing now. Um, so those are probably some of the earliest memories. That and like I remember like when Fatality was really big. There was a lot of media around that and like all the hardware endorsements and all that stuff. That's when I started really getting.
Yeah, he was kind of one of the first ones to really branch out into the peripherals and the hardware equipment for competitive video gaming.
Yeah, and I think it's that's when you realize that you could start to draw parallels between esports, traditional sports, where potentially you could start selling all the same things. I mean, jerseys, peripherals, like brand, all the kind of branded stuff that you have with sports. And I think people realize that this could be a real industry, not just something that people do for fun.
Yeah, and speaking of industry, a couple of things I wanted to talk about, and something that I want to start doing with the startup esports narrative is talk about some of these news stories that's going on. And one of them that I wanted to pick out is coming from the esportsobserver.com, and it's Vision Esports essentially gets a $38 million investment. Um, I'm curious, what do you think this means? So to put it this some background of this story. Vision Esports is uh, is I guess the essentially the holding company or the uh, special purpose investment vehicle that was established by Vision Venture Partners, which is a private equity firm founded by Rick Fox, who's the owner of Echo Fox, as well as his buddies and fellow entrepreneurs Amit Razada and Stratton Sklavos. So they have this investment vehicle, they have this investment fund. They just got $38 million investments from the likes of Evolution Media, which is an investment firm backed by CAA and a private equity fund at TPG Growth. So which also, they've also got investment from, I believe it was the St. Louis Cardinals, the team, NFL wide receiver Odell Beckham, Kevin Durant's media company, as well as some Walt Disney company, or the private investment arm of Walt Disney family. So they've gotten a significant investment. Like, this is probably one of the largest investments we've seen publicly that we know about. Um, so I'm curious, what do you think this means for esports, especially for other esports organizations, big or small? And does it give them, a big competitive advantage getting this influx of cash and these partners?
So I think a couple things. One, obviously, there's a lot of really smart investors on that list, and so I think how far esports has come. And I mean, those guys are have been investors in many different sectors. It's not necessarily esports specifics. See, like this quote unquote smartest guys invest in some sports in it. But also the other side of that is we see all these celebrities and sports stars. I don't know how much those professional sports players know about esports. They sure have a lot of money, and the fact that they're putting money in this as well means that there is a lot of hype involved too. So I think it's good. I think there's a lot of substance and a lot of hype, and a lot of growth for sports. As far as all the money coming in, I'm pretty sure they had a lot of money beforehand. So I don't necessarily think that they'll gain some crazy competitive advantage in terms of performance level because they were fairly well beforehand. But what I think it can do is definitely, in terms of gaining new fans, branding, marketing, um, strengthening their position to go to sponsors, say, hey, look, us brand sports, that I think definitely helps there.
Yeah, and the Vision Esports arm, I guess, is part of it is what their complementary company, I guess, is Twin Galaxies, gaming records and stats company. They organize the H1Z1 Pro League. There is a production company, and of course, EchoFox, the esports team or the esports organization. So to me, this sounds like kind of like a diversification to kind of build out some of these arms or these sister companies of EchoFox or Rick Fox's investment firm, and it sounds a lot like what Optic Gaming has done and some of the other ones have done to kind of build out the infrastructure and not just be a team. It seems like they recognize the opportunity to kind of create a one-stop entertainment like conglomerate. Do you get that sense as well? Like they're building out media companies and production arms and licensing and sponsoring departments and sales to companies. You get kind of that sense as well that they're building this out to be a big conglomerate type of deal.
Definitely. I mean, especially when some of these people are putting that amount of esports, like a lot of those guys are smart, but they're not necessarily top, right? And so if you if you really believe in the market and you really think that esports is the next big thing, it makes sense to diversify. Also, if you're going to put that amount of money in, you can get a lot of synergy from having integration. And so, if you said if they own, teams and tournaments and content and all that stuff, I think it's very similar to what like MSG Network used to be before they spun off media rights, where they own the venue, they own all the teams that are in it, they have media rights. It's very like vertically integrated, and you can control the narrative around it. You advertise all your venue and control exactly the message goes out to fans and build a. So I think that's definitely.
Yeah, for sure. And the last point I want to make about that article from the Esports Observer is there's a quote in there from Evolution Media, and it says esports is one of the highest growth sectors within all media and entertainment. We couldn't be more bullish on the space and Vision's market position, which is a quote from Rick. I believe it was Rick Hess, which is the co-managing partner of Evolution Media. So they made that quote, and that kind of ties into the next story that I want to talk about coming from Crunchbase, and that one is titled "Funding Surges for Esports Startups by Approximately 1,125% in 5 years." And the main takeaway for me, at least initially in that article, was that although the investment amounts, according to Crunchbase, and their numbers, it spiked. Their investment amounts spiked 186%, they say, between 2016 and 2017. However, the actual deal flow, the amount of deals that happened, stayed nearly kind of the same, relatively flat. So they took from that it was signaling a larger average deal size. which just kind of indicates the further strength of the market, right? That it's growing and it's continuing to progress.
Well, yeah, I mean, so when you're starting out with something and investors don't really know it or whatever, um, you always got to make sacrifices on the valuation of the deal through. As more of these things go through, I think uh, valuations are going up and people are also raising money. It's a combination of both. I think it's higher valuations just because the sector is more in demand, and also people are just being ambitious.
Yeah. So why on that note, with the funding and like the investment surging right now, why do you think esports is so exciting and exploding right now?
I think it's obviously an industry that is here to stay. So, at the beginning of any kind of boom or whatever, people want to know, well, is this going to be a thing in 5 years, or is this just like, a bubble that's going to pop and everybody lose all their money? And so I think initially people might have been skeptical, especially people who didn't really understand the industry. Like, what? But, we're going to watch people play video games. Like, who would do that? That's crazy. But apparently that's a pretty big thing.
Hmm.
So um, I think now that the industry has proven itself, and the next thing after validation of do people want this, the next thing was can it make money? And for a while, I think a lot of investors were skeptical about the revenue aspect of it. Like, how are you going to generate revenue? Can you make enough money to offset all these team costs and things like that? And I think now we're seeing that as more and more like endemic but also non-endemic brands pour into the space, I think we're seeing that there's very strong potential for revenue generation. Um, so I think those two things have gotten people a lot more comfortable with the space, and I think that's why they're able to look at esports just the way that you would look at traditional sports. Obviously, it's still growing, um, but the fundamentals are there, and now it's not like people are completely reshaping esports now. I think the fundamentals are there, and the fact that teams are being bought from a lot of traditional sports teams, and that for the Overwatch League is going with a traditional sports like franchise model. I think that is giving a lot of certainty to people who are investing in the esports space, that there is some kind of precedent that they're following, that they can know what to expect going forward. So I think that's why people are a lot more comfortable investing.
Yeah, and following on the trend of this article, and speaking of trends, actually, one thing that this article points out is, this generation of gamers have been gamified since birth. And one thing that I think resonates with me is that the idea of gamification exists outside of esports. It's a strategy that's used in a lot of different areas, a lot of different sectors, and it didn't necessarily to me like spin off from esports and gaming, but I think because of the nature of the people of a certain age coming up into this, I think that it will help spread it into other sectors even more. Do you feel like the gamification is something that is significant enough where it could spread to other industries and kind of help boost other industries as well? Or what's your feeling on kind of the gamification that we see happening?
You mean like in terms of adding game type elements to products that people would use to
Exactly. Yeah.
monetize them? Okay. Um, I think it makes you have to get people invested in what they're using, and so I think gamification is a really good way to do that. I think it works really well for esports and gaming generally because like people like games, right? So making the thing that people are using kind of a gamified. You already know that the people who are playing it, they like the challenge, they like coming back, and a lot of people like getting 95% completion or 100% completion on things they do. So they'll check into your app every day and earn the points and like highest, be the mayor of bar or whatever. People like that stuff. I don't know how widespread it is. I mean, I'm not really an expert in this, but you start to see a lot of apps that put in things like achievements and things like that. So definitely there is there's evidence to back up what you're saying. Like Fitbit is an example, right? Where it doesn't just track what you're doing as you're working out, but also if you take so many steps, you can earn a medal, and then when you earn a medal, you can like challenge your girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, whatever, friends to earn the same medal, compete with them to see who can get the most, and so I think that's definitely I mean it's definitely a thing, right?
Yeah, and I think it adds because it's being used so widely. I think it adds a certain level of validation to the strategy and outside of gaming, like you mentioned with Fitbit and other apps that are using it. It adds a certain level of validation that those things kind of work. Now, what's the biggest shift or the biggest trend you've been noticing lately in esports right now?
So there's a lot of different things going on in esports. Basically, the biggest trend that I've seen is people coming in and filling basically anything that exists in traditional sports, and somebody is making some esports equivalent of that, right? And I'm not saying that's positive or negative. I'm just saying that is a trend that I've noticed. I think because esports is still kind of growing, there is opportunity to bring in real value add services. So some of the things that I'm seeing that I find really interesting and that I can see a lot of room for development is like practice tools and training tools. Um, I mean, when you look at your average like top athlete, traditional sports, these guys are wired up with all sorts of tracking. They have every stat of like every practice session. They have guys telling them exactly what to eat, what to drink. They have coaches that help them run faster. They have coaches that help them like catch the ball better. And so in esports, we're definitely seeing some of that where like every single little tiny thing is getting a new product that fills it. I just helped somebody demo just the other day like two different aim practice softwares. So I was giving like feedback on like two different ones that I'd seen. So that's definitely a trend. The other thing that I've seen is the vertical integration that we were talking about earlier. Like I think definitely people are aware that there's synergies, and the more they own of it now, the better later.
Yeah, and one of the kind of the last thing I wanted to touch on in this and discuss with this article is that of engagement. You hear everyone talking about engagement and how accessible, esports is, video gaming is as a form of entertainment. And I haven't really heard a lot of people talking about why that is or what the implications are of that. So I'm curious if you want to take a crack at explaining what you think are some of the implications of esports being such an engaging and accessible form of entertainment. Like what happens to the audience, or what are the results from brands or companies that are looking to spend money and get money out of this industry. Like what does this mean when people say that esports is super engaging and accessible as a form of entertainment?
I think there's a lot of buzzwords that get thrown around, just because people say they want to hear them, and definitely engaging is one of them. Um, but that said, I do think esports is engaging. I would just worry about using that too much or in the wrong context to not really mean anything. So I mean, what I think they're trying to get at is that esports. if you want to look at it from a sponsor's point of view, esports is a great way to get people to buy things. And I'll tell you why. It's because the the games that people are playing are mostly games that the people who are watching also play. And so, anything that these athletes use, or um, definitely on the equipment side, is stuff that we can also use. But in terms of the product placement and things like that, it's fairly within reach. So, I mean, if you look at baseball, right? To play baseball, you need a baseball field, you need a whole bunch of people, you need bats and gloves, stuff like that. You don't want it to be raining. But I mean, when you look at League of Legends, like all you need is your laptop. You don't even need any friends to find people to play with, right? So it's much easier to get into that, and as a result, when you watch, when I watch baseball, I don't play baseball. Right? I don't find it interesting, but if you're watching something that you play, it's much easier to get involved, and so because these games are easier to get involved in and play, that result. I think also some of the products and things that are being advertised are a lot more accessible, and so when you advertise a keyboard, it's a lot easier to sell than some for this target market. Let's say that when a pro athlete endorses like a type of car or an expensive watch or something like that, it's not something that most people in the graphic afford. And so, from a sponsor's point of view, esports is great because a lot of the things being marketed are within reach of the people who are watching. If I see an ad for Slim Jims, I could just go buy Slim. It's not,
Mhm.
it's not a
Yeah.
luxury product or something like that. So
And one of the things that I agree with you, I definitely agree with you on the engagement and the the accessibility and what you described. And I also agree with Stephen Hayes's opinion in this article of you know the players and viewers are quote unquote are highly engaged, and I think there's a nuance to that. I think that with traditional sports, you have super fans. They buy jerseys. They will tweet about things and post and share things on Facebook. Traditional sports fans are doing the same things. I think the culture of esports and gaming is one that is more open to share those things. If you look at the average age, if you believe in the demographics of traditional sports versus esports, traditional sports audience are a little bit older of age. They're not as apt to share and open up their lives like younger kids, younger people are. So I think that there's a nuance to the engagement buzzwords and things like that. I think it has to come with some context around it. And I think that one of the examples I look at is Optic Gaming. They were referenced in this article, but my point is that Optic Gaming has one of the biggest, most passionate group of fans and audience out of all the esports organizations. I mean, these are most of them are raging fans, and they're to the point where they will, paint their shoes to match, the Overwatch League team. Um, the Outlaws, they'll customize their jerseys. They'll go to a certain extent where they're showing off their love for the team, and they'll share it online, which to me is part of that engagement, right? It's like not only being a super fan, but showing it off is where the engagement comes in, and wanting to buy the uh the jerseys and the hats and things like that.
I think there's a couple of things. One, I mean, obviously is generational, and so esports obviously has a younger average fan base. Younger people tend to use the internet more and share stuff more. So I think that's normal. But I think also because esports is still a growing market, like anyone who's a fan of esports is doing so by choice, right? And people are seeking out the content to watch it. It's not mainstream enough yet where you could just be like flipping channels on your TV and esports comes up, watch, right? That's that's not where
Mhm.
that's not where we are. Um, a lot of people are, if you ask people like, why are you a Jets fan? It's like, well, my dad was a Jets fan and Jets fan. But for esports, we haven't really reached that yet, right? Like no one just inherits fandom. Like people have to actively be seeking, and I guess that's eventually what these teams want, right? Like they want to have control over areas and become fans like that. But for now, it's really people seeking out that content that they want. Um, so I think it also has to do with how young the industry is to an extent.
Yeah, and talking about young audience, the last article I wanted to talk about comes from esportsobserver.com as well, and it's called Super League Gaming expands into 4 more cities, teases new games. So uh, it's the Super League Gaming. They are self-branded premier amateur esports league. They're branching out into Atlanta, Philadelphia, Tampa Bay, and Washington D.C. These 4 new teams will join the existing dozen that's in the Super League Gaming's theater-based Minecraft and League of Legends tournaments. And this is on the back of them in June of last year announcing a $15 million funding round with, notable investors Nickelodeon, Axiomatic, the NHL Tampa Bay Lightning owner Jeffrey Vinnick, global media brand DMG. So they've gotten significant funding, and they're expanding to kind of promote their movie theater esports league. And I'm curious at what you think about the amateur esports scene. What are your general thoughts about it, and how do you see that fitting in and kind of playing a cog in the wheel of the larger esports industry?
Um, so I haven't really read up too much on that, so I don't want to talk about something that I don't know too much. But generally, when I think about the amateur esports scene, I think that it has to develop, and it's going to develop, because you need something to support the top tier scene, right? So like when you look in baseball, you have the major leagues, but you also have minor league, lots of training programs and stuff that feeds in to make sure that the top pros are the top pros. They're the best people in baseball. And so I think there's always going to be room for an amateur scene because a lot of, if I'm really good at a game, what's to say that I'm not better than the guys playing at Dallas Fuel right now, right? If I'm a really good Overwatch player, and so I think it's going to be in the interest of the teams to make sure that there's some proper way for them to scout talent, make sure they're finding all those people. But I mean, generally, gaming is competitive, and people who like to play games like to compete with other. And I think even at a casual level, there's going to be room for that. I used to play tennis when I was young, and you can always find matches at the USTA level. So even if you're not competing to be the best, there's still people who enjoy playing competitively, and I think that's uh, a good way for them to do that.
Do you ever see the amateur side of esports overtaking, at least in terms of like popularity? Do you see it overtaking professional esports?
I always think that, and I think this in regular sports too. I mean, I always think that people are more interested in watching the best people play something. I mean, that's part of the appeal of the Olympics, right? Is when you watch a sport, you're seeing the best people play. Like I would have very little interest in watching, amateur curling, right? But like when it's the top 2 teams and you're watching them, that's suddenly more interesting. I've run amateur events in the past. Um, just because it's something that we really enjoyed. Like I used to play a ton of StarCraft. I was actually good at it, and we organized StarCraft events. And generally, the events that we had that ended up having pro players in them just got way better viewership. Um, and I think it's just because the level of play was higher. I think in terms of interest, certainly a lot of people would like to play, but in terms of viewership, I really think that the professionals, the top tier players are always going to do better.
What's your favorite thing about esports right now? I'm really curious.
Favorite thing about esports? Um, that's a tough question. There's a lot of things that I really like. Honestly, it's just seeing how good some of these guys. Like you always think that the level is set, can't get any better, and then there's always some new guy that comes up and amazes how talented. That, and also, I mean, as an entrepreneur, as a business person, just the amount of opportunity is incredible.
So now I'd like to talk to you about Rekt and kind of what you're doing. So I gave a little teaser of what was on your website, but tell us, tell us what Rekt.gg is, what Rekt is, and kind of how you came up with the idea to kind of create this company.
Sure. So Rekt is a social media platform for gamers who are not professional streamers. Essentially, when we were setting out to build this, we were looking at the average gamer and what do they do online and how many friends do they have who also, et cetera, et cetera. And we came to the conclusion that everything that exists right now, whether it's YouTube or Twitch, is good if you're already famous and if you have a lot of followers. But if you're just a guy who likes to play PUBG and upload some clips, whatever, it's not really good for you because Twitch, let's say, has 2.2 million monthly streamers on average, right? Unless you're putting in a lot of work to get followers and all that stuff, you're going to be the 2.2 millionth guy, and you can only watch one stream at a time, right? And they're ranked by order of popularity. So like no one's ever going to see the stuff that you're posting. Um, the other issue is that generally, when you look at something like Facebook, most people have enough friends to fill up a Facebook feed, right? And so that works fine. But when you look at gaming, most people don't have enough gaming friends or people that they know in real life to fill up an entire feed. And so if I go on stream right now on Twitch, I work in esports, but not that many people would watch me, and that's just because it's it's a much smaller niche. So what we're trying to do with Rekt is combine the two, where we help you find other people that you might be interested in playing with and interacting with, and people whose content you like, and we also help you show off your content to other people. But we do it in a way that is different. It's more like what Reddit does, where all the content goes in a pool and it's discoverable by the community. So I'd say that's probably the biggest thing that we do that is different in terms of approach. Yeah.
No, go ahead. Finish what you're saying.
Some of the other tools that some of the other things that we think are cool that we're working on is one, we have an editor, video editor that works in the website. So if you wanted to add like some GIFs or some sounds, I know a lot of YouTubers like to do that. They memes. You can do that just by dragging and dropping stuff in your browser. So you need a video editing software for that. And then the other thing that we are working on right now is a rewards program. So let's say Twitch and YouTube are like 90% of the people who are posting on there are not getting anything. You have a very small percentage who are partnered or affiliate. With our loyalty program, essentially everyone is rewarded for using the platform. And so if you have one killer video and you put it on there, you can win a Steam gift card. You HyperX headset, something like that.
That's pretty cool. I like that. I like the to reference something we were talking about earlier, kind of the gamification and the prizing.
Yeah, it's funny actually you brought up gamification, because that's something we're doing. So the platform itself, rewards people for using it. And I think that's good, because it also helps us have better content on the site. And so if you're the type of person who likes to look at stuff, there's some really entertaining videos to look at.
I'm curious what your background is or your skill set. Ever, are you into development? Like, what's your skill set and what do you bring to the table for Rekt?
So I've always been a business guy. I worked in finance for 10 years before doing this. Um, like we discussed earlier, I've been playing video games basically forever, and so what I bring to Rekt is the ability to look at a marketplace and see where there are issues or where things are missing, and to be able to build a product around that. I also do all the business development stuff. So working with partners, and so we're talking to a couple of top hardware manufacturers, sponsoring some of the prizes. We're talking to some esports teams about bringing some of their players on board, and that way players can interact with their fans and win prizes for sponsors, etc. So that's my skill set, and that's what I bring. I don't code at all, so so I actually spent like 2 weeks learning HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and built a very 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 primitive version of Rekt that me and like 7 of my friends used as a prototype. But once that was done, brought in some big gun developers to it out.
Yeah, development is one of those things where, I'm an IT guy by trade. I've done, scripting and things like that, never really true software development, but I've around it enough to kind of get a sense of it's one of those things if you do it well, or it's better to have someone do it well than have you do it and kind of make spaghetti code out of things.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's better for everybody to do what they're good at, and so certainly programming is my forte. But I do think it was very important to kind of sit down and like learn some of it myself first, because now I have a way better understanding of how all our backend. Um, if I'm asking for a small change, or if I say, hey guys, can you fix this? I know if it's a lot of work, or if
And that's probably a common problem, right? Especially with software companies, is that even the smallest of feature that someone who's unfamiliar with the process or how software development works or how these things are built and put together might not understand the gravity of their ask, right? So that gave you an understanding or a perspective as to what you could work on versus kind of the ROI of that feature, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so the other thing is we're a 3-man team, so we're very lean. So in terms of there's always things that we could do, that we could add to the product to make it better. One of the things that I do is really figure out what we need to focus our. So like somebody the other day said, hey, it'd be really great if you guys had a dark mode, the way that
Hmm.
Twitch does, where it's it changes the background to black, something like that. So you'd be amazed the stuff that people in our Discord are suggesting, and obviously we can't do every one, even if we'd love to. So managing that is also.
So are you kind of inundated with like feature requests or people kind of having their 2 cents? And how do you kind of decide as, from a high level of like what features you kind of want to pursue versus ones that you're going to table for now?
So the nice thing so far is that most of the features that people have been asking for are already on our to list, that's exactly where you want to be, right? Because you can only work as fast as you can work, and if people want stuff, the best thing you can do is tell them you're already working on it, right? So luckily for us, that's been the case. I think for us generally, where some of the requests have been is like integration. So hey, can you integrate with X program that I use or Y website that I use? And the answer is always yes. We're working on it. And then some of the other things that have been asked for is, more features in our video editor. So hey, can you add so and so like sticker to the to the video editor? And the answer is always yes we can. So that's actually fairly easy. So I manage. But pretty much across the board, it's not really weird stuff that we're seeing. It's what we expect people to ask. So
Have you ever had a request that's just like absolutely crazy,
of
like
course.
something that's kind of silly, like something that you're like, no way, absolutely never?
We've gotten some pretty, let's say unique requests that, usually when you're getting, tons and tons of requests and only one person asks for this thing, it's a sign that it's not worth putting the energy.
Is there anyone particular that comes to mind that you'd be willing to share of like something that's a feature that would be just outrageous and wouldn't provide any value at all?
Well, so I mean, so people have given us their thoughts on like how, um, we have various algorithms that figure out like what the weekly winners are in terms of the pricing. And then so I mean we've gotten some really strange math suggested, hey, I think the winner should be determined this way, and it was crazy.
Like Pythagorean theorem mixed with
I no I
you
would
know.
no basically I mean I think they were just trying to make it so that they would win more. Which is, I mean, fair play to them.
Awesome Gamer 88's mathematic algorithm for
Yeah,
winning prizes.
the guy's actually like a mathematics PhD somewhere, and he's just making sure that he's going to win every single Rekt of the week from now on.
So the equation he had was so complex that no one could understand it except him, which just verified that he would win.
Well, so it's usually it's usually things that we've thought of that they haven't, because they're only seeing, so they don't get to see all the things that we've tried and didn't work,
Sure.
right? So they may think they have a good idea, but we've actually tried some variant of it. So like everything works the way it does for a reason. Also, when you look at some of these algorithms, like you have to balance between, because everything is based on the number of users you have, right? So if you're trying to grow, you always have to balance your algorithms between for the number of users that you have now and for the number of users that you're going to have. And so people have been suggesting, hey, you should change the formula to be more like this, and said, well, because we're growing so fast, the formula that you suggested actually didn't work.
Yeah. Now the type of content that Rekt allows you to create is very popular. You see people sharing their clips online from all different platforms, right? They're sharing their clips on Twitter and Facebook and all that. It's really popular. The desire for that type of content is popular. I'm curious on kind of the response rate for the Rekt style that you're trying to create. Like, what's been the response that you've seen for what you're doing, and have you seen it kind of grow or change since you started down this path?
So I think a couple years ago there was like the Mountain Dew Doritos MLG like air horn on every single video kind of thing. Um, and certainly like that was really popular for a while, but like that's now people look at that and they go, oh, hashtag cringe cringe. People aren't really into that. So one of the things that we've been doing is more like evolving and trying to stay on top of the current demands of people. And so I think now more than before, people are laying off like the overly like meme type of editing, but they still use a lot of the features that you put in there, like Instagram stories, and I think Snapchat is allowing people to put gifs from Giphy on top of their
Mhm,
snaps now. Like that's something that we had 6 months ago.
mhm.
So I mean, it's not. It's definitely something that's in demand.
Do you see do you get inspiration from some of those platforms? Do you see like what Snapchat's doing or Instagram's doing is like, huh, I wonder if something
Oh,
like that could
absolutely.
work for the.
I think one of the things that traditional social media has done for us, it's given us a really good example of like what works. And it's also kind of raised the bar for any product that you use. So, I mean, when you look at like Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, like those are all really, really well crafted apps, right? And so it's kind of raised the bar for everybody else who's doing stuff like, even Twitter gets kind of scrutinized now. But people will look at them and say, "Oh, can't edit a tweet. What are we living in 2010?" Like, so definitely there's a lot of stuff from the various social media platforms that we've looked at, and we've said, "Oh, that's the way they do this is really smart. We should do it like that too." So because we're focusing more on social and having people interact with each other on the platform, I think we borrow a bit from Facebook, and just the way that every person has their own wall, or everybody has their own feed with customized content. The people either that subscribe to or the people that they're friends with. That's definitely a thing. And then I think Reddit does really well the like content discovery aspects of it. So if something gets put into the newest videos and it gets a lot of upvotes or people comment on it, they like it, then it starts trending. Um, Definitely, we've been trying to adopt a Reddit approach when it comes to content discovery on our platform. So that's also something we've looked at and tried to make it as good as theirs.
I've got kind of a strange question in relation to virality. How do you think you get one of your clips to kind of go viral? Like, is it the content itself? Like, is it just the right person sharing it? How do you think some of these clips kind of go viral?
It has to do with I think you'll notice like it's very hard to make something go viral, right?
Mhm.
It's when you're like usually the stuff that goes viral is stuff that no one was really trying to make viral. It just kind of went viral. And so when you look at that, and when you're actually trying to make something go viral, you realize that really the content has to, right? Like you can't there's no amount of like memes and hashtags and stuff that you can stick on bad content and make it go viral. Um, so some of our, when you look at some of our best posts, like we did an April Fool's prank last year, and that video did really well. Um, and some of the videos from our site, like some absolutely insane PUBG plays, where a guy does a backflip with a motorcycle off a building and like lands on top of another dude and like kills his four teammates. Just the most ridiculous stuff, right?
Mhm.
Those videos do really well, and it's just because they're very good. There's really nothing that you can do to force something to go viral. Certainly, there's stuff that you can do to increase your reach. If you understand proper marketing, and if you post in the certain subreddits at a certain time, and like you get all your friends to upvote it, and you do all that stuff, you can definitely increase your reach. But to reach like true virality, that also takes a bit of luck and really good.
Now, you've no doubt have learned some things along the way in creating this company and marketing it and pursuing what it is you're trying to do. What lessons have you kind of learned the hard way along this journey?
Um, hmm. So I'd say we made some mistakes early in the process. Um, I'll give you an example. One of the things that we worked on that wasn't a hit that needed to be fixed was our friends feature. Um, and the reason was that we had something that we thought was really intuitive, but we hadn't really like talked to anybody about it. And when we kind of put it down, quote unquote, like on paper, it looked good. But then when we actually launched the feature on our website, it wasn't received as well as we had hoped, and it's because it was confusing, right? So um, the way that we had it was that you could either be friends with someone or follow them, right? But then we ended up having to have, a number of tabs, like for people that you are friends with and people that you follow but aren't friends with, and people that follow you but you don't follow. And so there there was basically like all the different combinations of those that like needed their own tab, and it just got really messy and complicated. So we went back and kind of, thought it through, and it kind of rectified the whole situation. Now basically, um, you can, it's essentially the same, but like when you see it on the website, it's much easier to grasp. And it's just because in theory the idea was good, but I guess we hadn't spent it.
And that kind of shows like your flexibility and your willingness to change, right? Like willing to change and probably even willing to just scrap an idea altogether. Has that ever kind of crossed your mind of like if something just isn't working at all, are you it doesn't sound like you're romantic of like, oh, we need to have this because I have it's like my feature, I came up with it kind of thing. Like do you get a sense that, what you're doing is non-romantic in that sense?
Well, I mean, so there's certain things that, there's certain things that you can change and we're okay changing. There's certain things that you can't really. So I mean, like when we look at what we want to build, like we're building a social platform, right? Where the 90, something where the 93% of people who aren't affiliates or partners can hang out together and win prizes, talk to each other and see things they like, right? Like that, we're not going to change that because that's why we built the company. But how we display friends or small things like that, you can't really get too attached to because in the end, like it has to work for the user. Um, and so if you are inflexible in these things, people will just say, "Oh, well, this is a crap product. We're not going to use this. It's not easy to understand." Um, and so with things like that, we have to be a lot more um, flexible on. Like another example is when you think of a typical video editor, right? How you shorten videos. If you're using something like Photoshop, or no, not Photoshop, sorry, Adobe Premiere. If you're using Adobe Premiere, you would grab the beginning of the video in your timeline and just drag it, and that's how you set your, the length of that clip. Well, uh, we initially started doing it that way because me and the couple of devs that I'm working with are, we're in our 30s and 40s, so we're a little bit older. Um, what we didn't realize was people had gotten so used to how you trim on your phone, which is completely different, right? In your phone, it's fixed, and then you actually have these little arrows at the top, and you move the arrows to indicate the beginning and end of where you want to trim. Um, and so that was just like a complete oversight where we like did it one way and then didn't realize that people had completely moved to trimming by arrows. And so that was something that we went back and changed. So if you go now in user editor, you'll see we've got arrows that determine when a clip starts and ends.
So what would you say is kind of the vision of the company or where you want to take this or where you see this 5, 10 years from now? Like what's the big master plan of yours?
Sure, we're looking at it as the social media platform where users are going to interact with each other, not a place where you're going to go to watch. And so what I mean by that is Twitch is great. Twitch is really a great platform. However, you don't really go on Twitch to interact with other Twitch users. You go on Twitch to watch a channel, right? Even if you've seen Twitch chat on any popular channel, it's it's just people screaming at the screen and pasting emojis and stuff like it, right? It's the equivalent of going to a movie theater and all just collectively screaming at once. Like, and so that we don't think that's social, right? But we're not trying to do what they do well, right? Which is broadcast and have people be able to watch different kinds of things, etc. We're not doing that. Well, what we want to do is be like the Facebook for gaming, or the Snapchat. That's probably a comparison. Where people can interact with each other, and you can follow all your friends. And if you want to use it to discover new content, you can do that as well. With very simple to use and media customization aspect of it as well.
Now you mentioned a couple platforms that have apps. Is app development something that's kind of in your future of like what's you're thinking of how this looks?
We definitely want a mobile app. It's definitely something that's going to happen. Unfortunately, we're 3 people right now, and again, it is kind of goes back to what I was talking before about like what we choose to spend time on. Most of our users are already sitting at their PC because they're playing League of Legends, they're playing PUBG, they're playing Counter
Right,
Strike,
right.
etc., etc., etc. So for us, the mobile app is more for the notifications and social aspects of it. So people would never use Rekt on their phone, like just by themselves. The time when they would use their phone is if someone tags you in a video or someone comments on something posted, etc. Then you would get an alert, like you get an. That's when people open Rekt on their phone. So we would want to have a mobile app that just makes it slightly easier to receive notifications, just so you're getting tons of emails, as well as like push notifications, prizes, and comments, and to streamline. So it's definitely something we want to build.
So, in one word, what do you see as standing between you and your biggest goal, either for yourself, for like professionally, or for Rekt? Like in one word, or maybe a couple words. What's one thing that's kind of standing in your way? Is you see as the one hurdle that you overcome, and then it's like world domination after that?
That is very difficult. That is an extremely difficult question. I don't think we can do it. I don't think I can do it in one word. But I'll entertain your question. I think for us right now, the biggest challenge is just getting the word out there and managing, like I said, managing how we use our resources and time. So I think with the people that we do reach, they really like it. We have some of our most engaged fans, like in a Discord, where we all, I play games with some of them now, just people I've met through Rekt. But for us, it's always going to be focusing on what's important to continue to grow the company, and not necessarily building everything that we want to build, even though that is slightly sad.
Right, but like you said, it's a prioritization of building what you think will make you successful, not necessarily incorporating all the features that you come up with.
Oh yeah. So like one of the first ideas that I had was like we wanted to put achievements in it. So I was just thinking. I just sat for a while. I sat there of like cool achievements and like what to name them. You know how achievements always have like really witty names now.
Right, right.
So I thought like if you watch 5 videos like within 30 seconds of when they're posted, you could get the achievement Spawn Camper, and I thought that would be like really clever. So it's stuff like that we have so many of these ideas all the time, right? And it's just about managing like what makes it into the final product and what has to wait until we have a little time.
So my last question, what does esports need to do to continue to grow and be successful?
I think esports needs to continue to be entertaining and continue to keep things fresh. I think one of one of the one of the issues right now is I think there's almost certain games or during certain periods of the year there's almost too much content, and um, I think that it becomes difficult to watch, right? When you have like back-to-back like giant CS:GO tournaments, right? For me personally, I feel like it can drag on a little bit at times, and I think that um, definitely like changing up game modes or changing up maps or changing up the format in which the teams compete, etc. is something that definitely tournaments have done and can continue to do going forward. Um, I would love to see a hostage map played in a CS:GO tournament, or a protect the VIP type map played.
That would
Yeah,
be interesting.
because those are very different game modes, and even if they just did it for fun, it doesn't have to count towards the standing, but that would just be something interesting. So I think continuing to innovate and not getting stale. And then the other thing for esports to continue to be successful, I think they have to continue bringing in the right kinds of people who are going to help build it up as they have been. So in terms of at times when the hype gets too, when there's too much hype, it's easy to have like a sports bubble. I would like to see that esports continues to be grown in a sustainable way, so that we, instead of having a bubble bursting and then everything kind of disappears and sponsors are running away from the industry, they continue to come to it, believe that any money they put in it. So I guess I would be I would just be a little bit cautious about overhyping. But that's it. I mean, I'm super bullish about the sector. But I guess I would just be cautious about overhyping and potentially scaring the big sponsors.
Awesome. Well, lastly, just share where people can connect with you, where you want to direct them. You can find the website rekt.gg is where you want to go, but direct people where you want them to go. What do you want them to do? Share where they can connect with you and all that good stuff.
Sure. So, I mean, you can connect with, you can find Rekt at rekt.gg. You can follow us on Twitter and on Twitch at officially_Rekt. Follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/RektG. If you'd like to follow me personally, you could do so on LinkedIn. I'm way less into Twitter. And then
what was your Twitter handle one more time?
It's Electronic Mo, all one word.
Awesome.
And then I also run an online, a website for our meetup group with sports investments, esports industry and investments. It's a group that I run that has a lot of CEOs of sports startups, industry people, VCs, etc. You can find that at esportsmeetup.com.
Awesome. And is that local to New York City area?
So it has been, because I'm here and a lot of the meetings are in person. But we're doing an event at GDC. So we're doing our first San Francisco meetup on March 22nd. So this is generally something that focuses on the the business side of esports. So we sit and we talk valuation, we talk who's investing in what and things like that. So if you're interested to be part of that, just check out esportsmeetup.com.
Awesome. We'll make sure we link up everything in the show notes, and definitely check out Rekt. It's definitely one of those platforms that you see as being a kind of unique in the sense of what they're trying to do. And I definitely am excited to see where you guys take this, and wish you good luck and success with what you're doing. And hopefully we can chat again sometime and have some more news to talk about, and talk about more Rekt GG features and things like that. But I want to thank you for coming on, Mo. It was a lot of fun talking about
thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I appreciate you coming on, talking about the esports startup news and all sorts of stuff. Really appreciate your time and sharing it with us tonight.
All right, thanks. Have a good night.
And with that, just want to remind everyone that if this all goes as planned, this show is just the beginning. Thank you, listeners. I really appreciate you. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave me a rating on iTunes. I would love a 5-star, but if you think I deserve a 1, let me have it and tell me why.